it's Collin, and I want to start this smoke-filled room a little bit different. I first want to start by thanking everybody who's been watching, who's been viewing, who's been listening. This has been a great success already, and we're only roughly 10 episodes in. It's a pretty exciting thing, and the whole point of why we started doing this, we have a very narrow audience. Republican elected officials, Republican operatives, conservative grassroots people, organizational leaders, grassroots leaders in the state of Illinois. That's not a massive list. That's our audience, and we have hundreds of you who have tuned in, who have sent your thoughts, sent your feedback, who have told us that you're watching, have given us insights that we've been able to share. We really appreciate it. The whole point of this is so that we can all get better. I don't know about you, but I know my political team here and I are sick and tired of losing. It's not in my DNA to lose, but in the state of Illinois, if you're a Republican, it seems like we've just all gotten so used to losing that we're okay with it. And so the reason we started this was to share information, to share tactics, to show things that were done well. You hear us give kudos to people, even when it isn't in our personal best interest to do so. When there are things that could have been done better, we point it out. We do it fairly, we do it honestly and openly, but we talk about how things could be done better. Why? Because if we're going to start winning in this state, we need to be better and more informed and smarter on our tactics and just more strategic politically. And so that's the point of this. I'm really thankful to each of you who have watched, who have listened and sent in your thoughts. Thank you so much. You're the reason we do this. To my political team, thank you for putting up with this. I know it's a big chunk out of your weeks each week doing this, but it is making a difference. We're getting a lot of an impact. Speaking of my political team, we have with us 4 of our 5. We've got John, Abby, Chris, and Matt. Or I guess I could do it in a different order. Let's say Chris, Abby, Matt, and John. Not with us is our buddy Michael Butler. He's on vacation, but if you know Michael Butler, you know the dude is never on vacation. So he's still been doing stuff. He's still been doing politics, but we refuse to let him join us on this smoke-filled room because the guy needs to at least take a little time off. So Michael, we love you, and we'll get you again next week. We've got a lot to get to, so let's get right into it. The first topic we're going to talk about is our company. Each of us work for a company called Cor Strategies. Our company has released a poll of the Illinois 12th Congressional District primary between Mike Bost and Darren Bailey. That poll showed that Bost was leading by 6 points. That's with rounding. It's actually closer to 6.5, but it's a solid 6-point lead for Bost this early in the campaign. We did an entire live from the Lincoln desk on this. So please, Lane will put the link in the comment section of this recording. Please go over there and take a look if you haven't watched it yet. It's made it all over the place. We've been in newspapers and radio and TV hits, and lots of people are talking about the poll, which is awesome. My political team hasn't had a chance to really dissect it publicly yet. So I want to give you guys that chance. What did you see in that poll? What are things that stood out to you? What does this mean in your eyes for the 12th Congressional District primary? I'll open it up to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, right now, Mike Bost has a good advantage going into this race. I mean, like you said, Collin, he was up 6 points. But I think for me, the things are really in the crosstabs for me, where I think you can start to kind of see Mike's advantage. And personally for me, the one that I found the most important was actually kind of looking at our regional breakdown. So, we saw that Mike was doing really well in the Little Egypt and Metro East portions of the district. And, based on our crosstabs that we put out, those 2 regions combined make up 61% of the district. Mike is doing really well where the voters in this district live. I mean, yeah, Darren's beating him in central Illinois, but, that's only 11% of the district. So, Mike's doing well where the strongholds are. And also he has room to grow with his name ID. You talked about during your live from the Lincoln desk that, Bailey has a higher name ID than, Congressman Bost does. But, that just means that Mike Bost has room to grow with his name ID. So he's already leading in this race at the district wide. He's leading where 61% of the population is, and he has room for his name ID to grow, which means that he only has room for his lead to grow. I think Mike's in a good advantage. He's in the driver's seat, but he just needs to keep running a really good race between now and next March. And, Bailey shouldn't be a problem.
Go ahead, Chris.
I would like to reiterate the point regarding name ID, because it was last week or 2 weeks ago on the SFR, I played devil's advocate, and I had stated that one of the advantages Bailey is going to have in this race is that he ran a statewide campaign, and he was out and about with the Republican grassroots for an entire cycle, primary, general election. So his name ID, being a gubernatorial candidate, should have been higher. I expected it to be higher than that. while Darren does have an advantage in terms of name ID, it's slim enough to where, statistically speaking, it doesn't matter that much. So if Bost can build up his name ID by, when you're an incumbent congressman, you build up your name ID a lot of different ways. It's not just by doing political things, it's by sending out district mailers, telling, hey, this is what the Republican-controlled Congress is doing for you. It's setting up satellite offices. It's doing constituent services events and just being there and accessible to your constituents. Darren doesn't have a platform to do that right now. Darren is not an incumbent anything. All he really has is the ability to go out and reach out to the grassroots, because there are grassroots people who will support him. So that's going to be, it's good. Bost has the advantage of being the incumbent who'll be able to build his name ID by doing a good work as congressman.
Yeah, and Oliver, I want to go to you next, but let me just make sure I give context to our watchers and listeners to what Chris just said. So the name recognition for each of the candidates, Bailey had 70% name recognition, Bost had 61% name recognition. So what people need to understand is both of those numbers are very high. It doesn't seem like, those of you who are involved in politics who are watching and listening, you'd think, hey, you know who your Congress member is, but the average person, even the average Republican primary voter, doesn't know. 60% is actually really good name recognition for a congressional candidate or even a member of Congress. So the fact that Bailey's at 70%, that is a very, very, very high number. He's not going to get much higher than 70 in a race like this. And so good kudos to Darren for being so well known. That's a big mark in his favor. The fact that Bost is at 61, that's really good for someone who hasn't had a tough race in almost a decade at this point. He will grow from 61, but even he doesn't have a ton of space to grow, but he does have more room to grow than Darren does. But either way, both candidates at 61 and 70% name recognition, that's really high. And I know that seems crazy, but when you ask the average person who their member of Congress is, most of them don't know. When you ask them, heck, you ask them like who their state representative is, who their school board, I mean, no one knows that. The average name recognition for a candidate not named Donald Trump is going to be in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, not the 60s and 70s. So just that context for those people who don't read polls regularly, these numbers are both very, very high. Oliver, what were you going to say?
So before I get into what I was going to say, Chris, I was just going to piggyback up what you're saying, that Darren Bailey doesn't necessarily have a base, but you've seen folks like Jeannie Ives. She has not been in elected office for a number of years, but she's found a great way to really connect with her supporters in the grassroots and the community, and has continued to stay relevant long after she's been out of office. And I think many things about Darren Bailey's previous campaign for governor were not done well, but we all saw how he connected with the grassroots. And so if he's able to get something like that going in this race, I think it could be a real advantage for him. And what I was going to say is, like, if I see this poll and I'm Mike Bost, 6 points doesn't make me super comfortable. I'd like to be a little bit farther out at the start. I mean, I think, as you talked about, Collin, at the Lincoln desk, this really invites the Trump factor really into this race a bit more than you would like. And then now you have to worry about that in the back of your mind. So if I'm Mike Bost, I'd be a little concerned, but we all seen what a great operation he's run. So he just has to continue doing what he's doing. So.
Abby, you completely hit the nail on the head. I mean, both of these candidates are going to be fighting tooth and nail together until the very end. And what this tells me is, not just for this race, but for all incumbents, is you can't get comfortable. Even if you're in a extremely red or an extremely blue seat, you could very easily get primaried and make it a pretty close race. So if you're a sitting incumbent, don't get comfortable, and make sure you're continually raising money and doing a good job, or people will call you on it.
Yeah, in the live from the Lincoln Desk recording where we unveiled these results, we talked about what this means for each of the campaigns, and I'd love to get your thoughts, because I shared my thoughts on where I think you take this if you're each of the candidates. And I'll summarize that when you guys are done sharing. Of course, you're welcome to steal my thoughts if you want. But what do you guys think? Where do you go now for each of these campaigns? Based on what you see in these numbers, what are the next steps if you're the Bailey campaign or the Bost campaign?
If I'm the Bailey campaign, I see these numbers. I'm saying I'm within 6. Hey, the first poll that comes out of a primary cycle that's really contested like this, being within 6 is phenomenal. I've seen polls coming out of other primaries, some internal, and the challenger is usually down this stage of the campaign 20, 30 points sometimes. being down 6 this early is great. So you could use that as leverage to donors because frankly, Darren doesn't have fundraising fast. It's gonna be his hardest part about this race. So I'm Darren. I'm gonna use these numbers. Hey, I'm within 6. I'm not out of the water yet. Give me money. If I'm Bost, I do the same exact thing. I'm up 6. Give me money. So it all comes down to money here. And that's what I would do. And if I'm Bost, I'm looking at that name ID number and says I have a 9-point gap here. Let's start pounding the pavement now. We're going to have a robust, petition season in a month and a half. We're going to have a robust petition drive. If I need 800 names for petitions, I want to get whatever the maximum amount of petitions I get. If I can get 10,000, 20,000 petitions, I'm getting them to do whatever I can to boost my name ID.
Yeah.
For me, I would start.
Chris.
Go ahead,
Oliver,
John.
go ahead. Go ahead, Oliver.
I was gonna say, if I were Bost, I would look to shore up as many ships as possible and try and suck as much air out of the room, whether that's donors, whether that's volunteers, whether that's anything else. I just think making it so he sees this poll and he thinks, okay, great, I have a chance. Then he turns to all the elected officials. Nope, I'm supporting Mike Bost. He turns to volunteers in the grassroots, and they're already loyal to Mike Bost. So I think if he can kind of corner Darren Bailey so he doesn't have a lot of options for support, I think that's where I'd be going next. John.
Well, to your point, if Michael was here, I'm sure he would
Yeah.
say that the Bost campaign, since our last recording, unveiled that they have the endorsements of 18 county Republican sheriffs in the district, many of which are not from Bost's old district. They're new to the 12th district, and Bost has locked them up already. So to your point, it seems like Bost, that is what he's working on. John, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I really, agree with Chris's point about being able to go to donors. I think for Darren, this is a good opportunity for him to go to donors, especially considering his major donor from 2022 was most likely out on supporting him for public office. So, he's going to have to find, business owners, farmers, just everyday people within the 12th congressional district who are willing to donate to him. And I think, this poll gives him a path to possibly expand his donor base. But, it's the exact same thing for Mike. I mean, Mike has the ability to say, look, we're up 6 points. We can be in the driver's seat if we just have the resources, to put this thing away by February. He can use this poll to put up a really strong Q3 and just obliterate Darren, when it comes to paid media, volunteers, and everything that you're going to need to run a successful campaign. And the benefit for each campaign is that this was an independent poll. We talk about all the time internally how internal polls are kind of skewed because, you're could be using a certain call list that's the same as your mail list. So they're seeing your message time and time again. This was an independent poll conducted by us. And I think it gives them credibility to go to donors and say, we need the resources to put this away.
Yeah, and I would speak to the response by each of the campaigns. I mean, I get frustrated sometimes by these campaigns that want to shoot the messenger. We saw that a lot in the municipals this last time around where we released some polling and people freaked out because how dare we release some polling? And the mark of a good campaign is they know how to handle situations. They know how to handle things that come up. I mean, this was not, neither campaign knew we were doing this. They found out, we announced it on Monday and rolled it out on Wednesday. Everyone found out on Monday. Nobody knew prior to that point that this was happening. So, you could see the difference in the quality of the campaigns just in their responses. In the story that Brendan Moore wrote that got released on Thursday about the poll, you saw that Miles, the campaign manager for Bost, was ready with a quote, and he said, "This is great. We're in the lead. We're not going to take this lightly. We're working hard," and had a response ready to go, and they were clearly ready to utilize this. And to your point, I mean, they'll use this for fundraising because they're smart over there. They know what they're doing. On the Bailey side, it was no comment. They didn't engage on it. I mean, they should have said, "Look, we're the challenger. We're only down by 6 in a poll in July. This is great news for us," and they could parlay that into some positive publicity and some fundraising, but they didn't do it either because, I don't know, maybe they hate the media because many conservative campaigns refuse to engage with the legacy media, or maybe they just weren't ready to respond. I don't know, but you could even see in the response and lack of response from the two campaigns, which one knew how to handle something like this and which one didn't. So, I give credit to the Bost campaign for being ready to handle something like this, for having a response ready to go. I mean, to Chris's point, they should both be putting this in an email blast to their supporters asking for donations, because whether you're up 6 or down 6, this is highly motivating to your base. And we'll see which one of them are smart enough to do that. Matt, it looked like you were going to jump in with something.
Yeah, the interesting thing now is now that we have some data to go off of is the bar is now set. And we always talk about in campaigns how it's all about momentum. So now if Bost or Bailey, they do worse or better the next time around, then now that we have this benchmark of the previous poll, then they'll have to play off of that. So it'll be interesting to see how they do next time we pull them.
Yeah, and I'll give a summary of what I shared on the SFR or on the live from the Lincoln Desk recording, which was or live stream, which was where each campaign goes. I mean, if I'm Darren, there's a couple things here that stand out for me in the Bost numbers. I see that Bost only has 8% unfavorable. You're not going to beat an incumbent if they only have 8% unfavorable. You're going to have to drive those unfavorables up. And I'll be honest, if the Darren Bailey campaign hired, I mean, you guys can tell I'm a cocky SOB. I think I can do anything. And yet, even if I was running Bailey's race, I don't know what I would do to raise Bost's unfavorables because he's with you on most issues. You just don't have a lot. You'll run an outsider, insider campaign, but that does not move numbers. I wouldn't do that if I was running that race because I know from history that does not move numbers. You got to find something that's going to raise Bost's negatives. Otherwise, you're not going to beat him. So that's the first thing I'm looking to do. And the second thing I'm looking to do is, hey, listen, you've got a name ID advantage. Take advantage of it. This is not a race you're going to win or lose in January, February, or March. This is a race you're going to win and lose in 2023. It's counterintuitive. Most campaigns raise a lot and spend a little and then dump it all at the end. Why? Because that's when voters are paying attention. I get it. But this is not a standard race. You're campaigning to one person, and that's Donald Trump. If you don't dump money and efforts over the next 5 to 6 months to raise your numbers, to drop Bost numbers, to get your fundraising up, like you need to do all those things so that Trump says, okay, in January or February, all right, I got you, I'm coming in for you. Then you're done, you've lost. And so for Darren, this whole race is a 2023 race, not a 2024 race. Raise every penny you can, and I'd spend it all in 2023 because either in January, you've done your job, you're in a good position, and Trump will come in, other donors will come in, and you can refill the coffers, or you haven't, and you were going to lose anyways, but at least you gave it the best chance you could. That's what I would do on the Bailey side. We'll see if they do that. But this message about, I'm an outsider, he's an insider, we have never seen that work. I've been doing politics a long time. That might move single digits in numbers when it comes to name recognition, when it comes to Bost unfavorables, but people aren't going to care if he's an insider or an outsider. They're going to care, is he getting the job done? Is he making my life better? If people in Illinois do not care about how you do it, as long as you're making their lives better. And so the outsider versus insider thing is not going to work. If I'm on the Bost side and I'm looking at this, I feel good. The fact that you knew Darren would have higher name ID, and the fact that you're still up 6, the fact that your net favorables are higher than Darren's are, despite the fact that your name recognition is lower, I'm looking at this as good news. This is not the Davis-Miller fight where Davis started over 20 points up and then drop to where he lost by a significant margin after Trump came in at the end. This is not that type of race. And so when I look at the race that it is, I'm happy at 6 points up. I'm going to build that up. I'm going to strengthen that. And I know whoever controls the contrast wins this race. So if I see Darren out there talking about insider versus outsider and fighter, I mentioned this on the live recording. I'm not saying this to attack Darren. I'm just pretending like I'm the Bost campaign team. I would say I'd concede the point. You're right. Darren fights, but Darren fights and loses. And give examples. On the school board, he didn't stop property taxes. In Springfield, he couldn't stop corruption. When he fought against COVID, he couldn't stop the mask mandates. He couldn't stop us from getting shut down. He fought against Pritzker and lost that campaign. Yeah, Bailey fights, but Bailey fights and loses. Meanwhile, I'm Mike Bost. I fight and I win. I fought for this country and the armed services, and then we won. I fought for you when I took this district from Democrats. I fought for you in Springfield when we put Blago behind bars. I'm fighting for you in Congress where I did whatever, pick your issue. I fight and I win, and that's the difference. You can even play on the fact that this is Southern Illinois, so it's not Cub territory, and call Darren Bailey the lovable loser and tie him with the Cubs, and that's not super favorable in the district. I mean, you could play with this and have some fun, get your volunteers doing memes about lovable loser. You could really build off that concept. I think the message plays in Bost's favor if he uses sort of that contrast, because I say the contrast looks better for Bost than it does for Darren. Any thoughts on all that? Because I shared that on the live. I'm curious if you guys think some of that is good or some of that is crazy.
Well, Collin, I think you brought up something important, the Trump factor. I mean, so we saw from our polling that Trump was at 53% of this district. I mean, DeSantis is all the way down at 16%. We might get into this later, but DeSantis is running a pretty shaky campaign right now. And Trump's kind of being the front runner to the nomination. And, the way the delegate process works in Illinois is delegates are awarded at the congressional level here in the primary. The state party is yet to put out exactly how you become a delegate in 2024. But if I'm Darren Bailey or if I'm Mike Bost, I'm making sure that I can be a Trump delegate in 2024, because that means my name is going to be on the ballot twice. My name is going to be on the ballot at the presidential race where you're voting for your delegates. It's going to say Mike Bost, delegate for Donald Trump. And then people are going to go down. They're going to vote in their race for Congress. So, both campaigns need to be making sure that their candidate can be a delegate for Trump in the 12th Congressional District in 2024, because that could also be another added advantage.
Yeah, and as for context to that point, for people to understand what's on your ballot, it's constitutional amendment, state constitutional amendment, then the federal races, then the state races. And in the federal races, it starts with president above Congress. So what you're talking about, John, is there's always two questions for president. There's the who do you prefer, which, by the way, doesn't actually matter. That your vote on that poll or on that question, your ballot means nothing. And then it's the question on delegates, and you select what delegates you select or that you want to vote for, and whichever delegates get elected, that's where these electoral college votes get apportioned in the state. And so as a result, the point you're making is a really good one. And I know we talked about this in the office this week, that if one of these campaigns, if it could be Darren Bailey or Mike Bost as a delegate for Donald Trump, that's going to be above their race for Congress on the ballot. And so that's a really powerful thing that I haven't heard anybody talk about. But if you can get in as being a delegate, one or both of those guys, it's going to make a difference in the race.
Now, forgive Mr. Democrat here for being unknowledgeable on this topic, but at least in the Democratic Party previously, congressmen were usually automatically delegates because of the super delegate system. I don't know if that carries over to the Republican Party, where congressmen can't also be delegates, or they're already a delegate in some way.
I don't know if they can't. I think the super delegates are awarded, but I think you still could be a normal delegate. But if that's the case, then you make your spouse, make Cindy Bailey the delegate for Donald Trump in the district. I mean, there's ways around that to get your name there associated with Trump as a delegate. So we don't know. I know John is efforting, trying to figure out exactly how this is going to look in Illinois this time, because it looks different every year, but it's typically controlled by the presidential campaigns. I know in the past we've helped people become delegates, and we've had to go through the Romney campaign in Boston, or these decisions are made by the presidential campaigns typically, but there are state chairmen and the state party who have a voice in it. And so this is probably going to be a bit of an inter-party battle over which campaign can get their people as delegates in that 12th district for Bailey. And so that's going to be super interesting to watch.
So there's 2 points regarding loserness. That's a word now. We're making up words every week here on the SFR.
Sometimes made up words are good, but I think that's a crappy one. Do better.
I'll figure it out. It'll come to me at some point. Anyway, the status of being a loser. You know who hates losers? Donald Trump. And that's a message that'll resonate very well for him if he in fact goes with your the Bost team goes with your idea.
The lovable loser concept.
Yes, but here's the other issue. You mentioned the St. Louis Cardinals. They are terrible this year. You think the White Sox are a joke franchise? I mean, granted, we just lost a series to the Cardinals.
No. Hold on. The White Sox are a joke franchise. The Cardinals are just having a bad year. There's a big difference.
Right. But, the Cardinals people are going to think about the Cardinals as being terrible because they're having a bad season. So I don't know if either campaign.
Yeah, but remember when this race is, Chris. This race is not going to be happening over the next couple of months. This race is you're talking spring training, hope abounds. This is not a race happening right now. So this year's standings aren't going to matter. But my point is, you're tying them to the Cubs. You're not saying I'm pro Cardinals. You're just saying, most people hate the Cubs down in specific areas of that district. And so tie your opponent to a team that nobody likes, tie him to the loser concept, which Trump is going to hate. If you want to keep Trump out of this district, listen, this is not a completely original idea. The NRCC already started hitting Bailey for being a loser. I just built off of that with the idea of the lovable loser concept, where you give Darren some love. Because here's what you got to understand. When you're in this race, both candidates have high favorables. Bost's favorables right now are at 54. Bailey's are at 55. If you just go and attack the other guy, you're probably going to lose support because both of them are liked. So you got to be smart about the way you approach this. And so that's my point, is saying, hey, listen, Darren's a great guy. We love Darren. Don't attack Darren directly. Attack Darren's results. And that's what you do with that lovable loser concept. We love Darren. We're so grateful Darren is a part of the conservative movement. But listen, these fights in DC are way too important. We can't lose them. And so we can't entrust it it to somebody who might not win these fights. I win, he doesn't. That's the idea here, is you don't attack the person, otherwise you're going to lose support. You attack the results.
It's a fair point. Hopefully the Cardinals can have a good offseason and the
Aye.
Cubs continue to be extremely mediocre.
Luis Robert
Well-
got hurt just thinking about playing in the All-Star game. So I don't know why you're attacking all these other baseball teams, my guy.
You know
Did you
what?
not
I
hear
did
us
not want to
admit that
hear
we
it
have a
from the
joke franchise right
perpetually
now?
terrible Detroit Tigers. Okay, let's calm down here for a second and let's not go into
Sorry, I
this
couldn't
rabbit hole.
resist. Couldn't resist.
Yeah, and I think everybody needs to calm down, considering the Cubs have the best record of any of the teams we've been talking about and are the closest to winning their division right now. So they
Oh.
might be lovable losers, but they're only 7 games back. Well, those dirty White Sox are what, 8 or something?
Oh, a one game difference. Wow, buddy. It's
Wow.
a big
Low-hanging
high moral
fruit.
high ground you can stand on. All right, let's move on from this topic. We've spent a lot of time talking about this and we've got way too much else to cover. So thanks for your thoughts on this. Let's jump into other Illinois campaign updates. We've got a few on the Democratic side. And so Chris, let's go to you first. I know in Senate District 20, there was an appointment and it looks like there's going to be a massive battle over the next 9 months between progressives and the more establishment mainstream part of the Democratic Party. And the heat of that, the heart of that, it's going to be Senate District 20. Tell us what's going on there.
So Senate District 20 is on the northwest side of the city of Chicago, goes from Lakeview up through Logan Square, Avondale, a bunch of gentrified yuppie neighborhoods. You know those types of neighborhoods. Anywho, there
You
was
mean places that DuPage would work well in, but you wouldn't.
he doesn't know anything about Chicago. Okay, we already tried Lake County people working in the city of Chicago for one race, and Paul Vallis lost. We're not going to deal with that ever again.
Oh, yikes.
Anywho, there
Damn.
was speaking of city of Chicago mayoral race, this vacancy came about because the former state senator, Cristina Pasion-Zayas, is now Brandon Johnson's deputy chief of staff or something. Who cares? She's not in the state senate anymore. So the way the state works, we got to appoint someone. Now, of all the ward committeemen in this district, almost all of them were controlled by more moderate members of the Democratic Party. We're talking about Iris Martinez. We're talking about Alderman Gardner from the 45th Ward. We're talking about Gilda Thrill Villegas from the 36th Ward, who previously ran for Congress. So you're talking about a lot of more moderate members of the Democratic Party over there. So as such, they control the weighted vote, and they appoint their girl, Natalie Toro. Natalie Toro is a Chicago public school teacher. I believe she formerly ran for county board last year, and she was chosen over the progressive choice, which was Graciela Guzman. And she, at this, Ms. Guzman at this appointment meeting, declared that she's going to run anyway, and all of the independent political organizations are behind her, and this is going to turn into a real fight. Now, there's a lot of fights going on in that neck of the woods. I mentioned Iris Martinez. She's the clerk of the circuit court. She will be primary. She will be primary. It is a done deal. It is a certain thing. Who, not necessarily determined right now, but she will be primaried by an unholy alliance of Tony Preckwinkle and the Democratic Socialists of America, because neither of them like her. Tony doesn't like her because, she's not affiliated with Tony's control over the county, and the progressives don't like her because Iris is affiliated with the Fraternal Order of Police. So there's a number of different primaries going on here. I call it the primary from hell because of so many different things going on here. And it's going to be a difficult race for Toro to win, in my opinion. We're talking about Logan Square. We're talking about Avondale. We're talking about Lakeview. All areas Brandon Johnson won. All very, very progressive areas. And if I had to bet, they're going to vote for the progressive candidate here.
Yeah, and this puts Harmon in a tough spot because you have to defend your incumbents, but to your point, this is definitely a very progressive district, and it's a Democratic primary. We always talk, and I hear from my Republican friends, my conservative friends, that the Republican Party is getting way too conservative. You hear this from moderates, of course, too, that our party is moving further to the right, and that may or may not be true. But listen, the Democratic Party is moving further and further and further and further to the left. That's why they left you, Chris. So when you look at this district, it's a Democratic primary, and in the city of Chicago, how many moderates have been knocked out in the last 2 or 4 years in these primaries? So even if it wasn't a progressive district, I would say that the candidate that was appointed, Toro, is probably in a bit of trouble. And looking at this district, the fact that it's a progressive, I would say that, frankly, Guzman probably starts off as the front runner, despite the fact that she's not the actual incumbent.
I would agree with your point there. And to the statement on Harmon, we do have some recent evidence to go off of how Harmon might choose to play this. In 2022, there was a race in Will County. That was in the 43rd Senate District. That was Rachel Ventura versus Eric Mattson. And, you know, the strings were pulled. Eric Mattson ended up getting appointed to the seat, and the Senate Democrats came in hard. I mean, they spent over $1 million on this guy, and they lost. They lost by 15 points to Rachel Ventura, who won by who only spent like $60,000. So again, here there's some. So if you're Harmon, you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I got to support an incumbent here, but I blew 1 million clams supporting Mattson last year, and even he couldn't win in Will County. How's this going to play in the most liberal part of the city of Chicago? So if I had to guess, I think Harmon will probably back the incumbent just because it's a bad precedent to establish that you're not going to do that.
Listen, here's the thing. Harmon doesn't have to worry about the map in 24. I mean, we've talked to a lot of our colleagues on the Republican side. The way that these districts have been set up, 2024 is the fewest number of Senate seats that are up for re-election and that there will be over the next 10 years. So there are already fewer seats up. And when you look at the races that are up, other than maybe Hastings, there aren't a lot of good opportunities for Republicans to have pickups. And so for the Democrats, for their money, they're not going to have to spend a ton of money on the Senate side. There are opportunities in the House. And personally, I think there are a few more opportunities in the Senate. But the way that they're looking at the maps, it's 19 or bust for a lot of these people. And so if you're the Senate and you're Harmon, you've got a lot of money, you spend it on your incumbent. Why? Because you're playing member management now. Now you're talking about how you need their votes when it comes to tough bills in the next session. So you show your members that you back your members, even when it's tough. And so I think he has to come in for him. But the good news for Harmon and the Dems is they got nowhere else to spend their money. So you might as well spend it here.
I don't know, Collin. One thing I've learned about the Democratic Party is that there is no shortage of primary challenges. Doesn't matter who you are, you're not safe. So there might be other primaries he's going to have to look at here and spending money in. I'm not saying there's any specific ones, but what I am saying is that, like you said, they're moving further and further to the left. Nobody is safe. So therefore, I could see some other primaries coming out he might have to spend some clams on.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The timeline here is early. So, I mean, petitions aren't getting passed here. By the time this is being watched, you're talking about, less than 2 months, but almost 2 months until petitions start getting passed. So there will be more primaries. So you're right. This is a playing field that will be different when we talk about it a couple months from now. All right, let's stick with you, Chris. I know we've got another race where we've got a challenge. This one for a federal race in Illinois 7. Danny Davis has not one now, but 2 challengers, both of which made it official. One was kind of in, one was not even in yet, and both over the last week have made it official that they're both going to be running against Danny Davis. So, Chris, what do you got going there in the 7th?
So in the 7th Congressional District, which is west side of Chicago, a little bit of the southwest side of Chicago, Keena Collins, who had previously challenged incumbent Danny Davis in 2020 and 2022, announced this week she's given another go at it, perhaps third time's a charm. And I'll get into, we're talking about a lot of primary challenges here today. I'll get into what kind of primary challenges mean for future elections in a minute. In addition, so she's a progressive darling. All the progressive Bernie Sanders-esque organizations were supporting her the last 2 elections. In addition, the incumbent city treasurer of Chicago, Melissa Conyers-Ervin, announced that she is basically 99.9% in. She's already fundraising, and she's basically going to announce sometime in the next couple of months. And
for context, for those who don't pay close attention to politics, she had said months ago that if Davis does not run, I'm going to run for this. Now she's saying I'm 99% in no matter what. So that's the change here. That is a unique difference.
Yeah,
Chris,
exactly.
Are you asking mommy for some meatloaf?
No, the landline keeps beeping for some reason. So
Ma, I want some meatloaf.
We're having hamburgers tonight, actually.
Another pop culture
Thank you for doing
Of
that,
course,
so
my
I'd
team
have
is
to,
too young
Pat.
to get it. Wedding Crashers, come on, guys. One of these days you'll get one of my references. Anyway,
I've seen Wedding Crashers. I just didn't feel like going on with the shtick here.
Ma, the meatloaf.
Anywho, Melissa Conyers-Ervin. So you're right. She had said that she would only run if Davis doesn't. Now she's running anyway. And listen, Danny Davis is old as dirt. And much like Bobby Rush, people are just waiting around for this guy to either retire or drop dead. So it's not surprising that other people are going to jump into this race. Now, what's interesting about I'm going to call her Irvin because I don't like hyphenated names. What's interesting about Irvin jumping in this race is that she will split again. Let's assume for a moment that there is three candidates in this primary. Danny Davis won the last 2 elections by putting up huge numbers in the African American portions of this district. She is going to cut into that. She will cut, especially in the city of Chicago. She will cut into that. Her husband is Alderman Jason Irvin from the West Side. He will be. I mean, you always support the wife if she's running. So there's going to be votes taken out of that area from Danny Davis. So I mean, this kind of hurts Danny Davis a lot more than it hurts Keena Collins. And honestly, if I'm Keena Collins, I'm kind of supporting Melissa's entrance into this race because Keena did very well in the white portions of this district. And if they're just fighting it out in the black portions, and if I can get the same numbers I got in the white portions last time, I'm kind of sitting pretty right now. So again, this is, when Democratic infighting, it's very interesting how this plays out.
Well, and I think your point is interesting because most people would look at this and say that 2 challengers means that that actually helps Davis because they're splitting the anti-incumbent vote. But you're actually saying in this race, it might be different.
Yeah, I mean, because again, this is the city of Chicago, a little bit of racial politics. And Keena Collins, yes, she is African American, but Collins is an Irish name, and there are Irish people in this district. You're dealing with downtown Chicago. You're dealing with Oak Park. Oak Park is one of the most progressive areas in the world. So you're dealing with that. Bridgeport is in this district for some reason. Canaryville is in this district for some reason. So there's areas of this district where white voters are usually more inclined to vote against challengers as more of a protest vote. So she might actually do well off of this. And if Davis and Irvin split the black vote to such a degree, I think Collins can actually have a better shot here this year than she had in previous years. And she only
I think people need to know. People need to know this is Collins's 3rd run, and from the first run to the second run, she did significantly improve her results. So this is a candidate who is on the upward trajectory, at least in their electoral results.
Yeah, and like you said, this is her 3rd run. So I want to add this point in here because we're talking about Darren Bailey. We're talking about this primary challenge in 20th Senate District. Think about challengers; they often don't stop. And one of those things is, Keena Collins. Let's say she loses this race by like 2%. You think she's just not going to run again in 2026? No, they always keep going because there's this endless supply of progressive PAC money. There's this endless supply of small dollar donors who are keep going to donate to you. And you're always going to have these progressive people behind you, especially when you're going up against an incumbent. And going back to the Darren Bailey thing, what if Darren Bailey only loses by like half a point? Think he might give it another shot in 2026 because they never stop. These are opportunistic, sometimes very self-centered people who want to see themselves in Congress, and they never stop. So you kind of want to put these people down now before they start getting bigger. That's all I'm saying.
All right, last quick question. Give me a quick answer on this. I mean, is this Conyers Irvin changing her position on this? Have we heard from Davis on if he's waffling on running here, or is he all in on running again?
It sounds like he's all in on running for re-election. That's at least what I saw in the media. He did have a bad fundraising quarter. He only raised like $100K.
He always has bad fundraising quarters, though. He's never raised a lot of money.
But you'd think it'd be better. I mean, he literally has downtown Chicago in the district.
Yeah, but he's never had to work for it. He always gets elected without trying too hard. So it's going to be interesting to see.
And that's what you see with some of these long-term incumbents who get kind of complacent. They never raise money because, it's like, what do I got to raise money for? Nobody's ever going to challenge me. I mean, but you'd think 2 cycles of challenges might get Davis, hey, I got to get some money going here. I don't know. I would assume Davis would probably will probably stay in this race. But like you said, a month after the petition season, he's very old. So he might sit back and think, maybe I've stayed my term in Congress.
Listen, old politicians never die. They just smell that way. So, I mean, we're talking about somebody who every year people look for Bobby Rush, for Danny Davis to not run again. But I mean, they're going to be around for 50 more years. I mean, we'll die probably before they do. So we'll see. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Let's do some quick hits because we've spent a lot of time on some of these. So a couple quick hits. John, let's go to you. I know this was announced late last week, but it was after we recorded our Smoke-Filled Room episode last week. So give us just a quick rundown on, we've spoken about Dan Brady before on our shows, but he announced he's actually not running for anything. So give us that information real quick.
Yeah, so, last Friday, Dan Brady put out a statement saying that he's actually not going to be running for anything in 2024. He kind of said that his style of public service, which is very constituent driven and result oriented, is, lost in the culture of politics that exists. in 2023 and 2024. And he's also just really wants to continue the work that he's doing in his funeral home. So, that opens the path for, Regan Deering to, kind of be the front runner in her primary, House District 88. And it also means that Ray Estrada right now is the lone candidate in the 17th Congressional District. So, him not jumping in any of these races clears some primary fields for right now. But, I've heard that because he's not running in House District 88, Chuck Erickson, who's a former McLean County board member, might be getting into the race to kind of take that McLean County mantle. And, we'll see what happens in the 17th Congressional District.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that the NRCC is still actively recruiting in 17. So it doesn't seem like Estrada is going to have a completely open race there. There's still time for someone else to get in, right?
Yeah, the NRCC is still definitely actively looking for candidates. I know that a lot of the quote unquote tier 1 candidates have, declined running in this cycle. So, it'll be interesting to see who the NRCC finds, but I just know that they're not too high on Estrada as a candidate.
Yeah, I mean, Estrada it looks good on paper, but I've also heard there's some concerning things that they've found in some of the op research. So they're just doing their due diligence here in 17 because that's our best pickup opportunity. We can't risk that. As for 88, talk a little bit about, there may be somebody coming in, but I know Regan Deering has had a good fundraising effort so far. She seems to be putting together a pretty good campaign. So give some insight on that.
Yeah, so Regan's raised about $40,000 so far. She's given herself $15,000 as a loan to her campaign. So she's putting up some good fundraising numbers really early in this race. But like I said, Chuck Erickson, who's a former McLean County board member, is looking at potentially running for this seat. And as I've said before in previous episodes, over 50% of this district is McLean County. So if a really strong candidate can come from that county, they're going to be in a position to win this race. So, if I'm Regan, I'm spending a lot of time in McLean County right now campaigning, getting to know influencers. She recently picked up the endorsement of former GOP Chairman Connie Beard. So if I'm her, I'm trying to put just really lock up as much support out of McLean County as I can and clear the path for myself to the nomination.
Yeah, and let's just do a quick ode to Dan Brady. I mean, if he doesn't run again in the future, we've always been big fans of Dan's just because of what you said. He's an old school guy who just focuses on service over campaigns and politics, which we need more of. Unfortunately, it's hard for those types of people to get elected because they just want to serve. They don't necessarily want to do the political side of it. And that's always been Dan Brady's heart. So just a shout out to Dan as being one of those good guys in politics that we need more of.
Yeah, Dan Brady gave me a shot at 20 years old run a statewide race. So I'm always grateful.
So what
for
you're saying is Dan Brady's the reason we're stuck with you?
Yeah, Dan Brady is the reason you're stuck with me. But I'm forever grateful for Dan for the opportunity that he gave me. We need more Dan Bradys in politics, people who are committed to service and not just going on the House floor and screaming a bit, but people actually want to get things done.
Yeah. All right, let's move quickly back to Chris. We mentioned Senate District 19 in Hastings. I know there was a candidate who announced. Chris, tell us about Samantha. Is it Gasca? I don't want to say it wrong, but that's the best guess I have. Tell us about her and what's going on in Senate District 19, because that's the Republicans' best pickup opportunity on the Senate side in 2024.
Yeah, I believe it's pronounced Gasca, so that's what I'm going with here. So Sam Gasca, she ran for school board in New Lenox in 2023, lost. Now she's giving it a shot at the state Senate. I've had like 7 people call me this week asking, Chris, is this the girl? Is this how we're going to take out Hastings? I don't think this is the major play here. But it's one of those things where you get close in the district and a lot of people think they could be state senator. I think there'll be more people jumping in. At least one more person will be jumping into the race for state Senate in 19 against Hastings or whoever it might be. Let's be honest. But hopefully it's against Hastings. I don't think this will be the only candidate jumping in. So, there's still a few more months. Let's see who else jumps in.
All right.
Yeah. So Chris, really quick. We talked about Democratic primaries. Why isn't Hastings, getting a primary considering all the Oppo research out them from, a progressive woman who wants to, take on Hastings and all of his allegations?
There might be. If it happened, it wouldn't shock me. But you got to understand, the Hastings have been around in that area for ever. The old man's still mayor of Orland Hills, and he was central committeeman in the 13th Congressional District back in the day. So they have ties to everybody over there. And
Yeah,
if you
but,
just
but
look,
let's be real. For those who don't know Southside politics, I mean, Papa Hastings is the power. The kids have screwed it up time and again. It's Papa Hastings who has the power.
right. And nobody from any organization, be it from Bremen Township or Rich Township or anybody, none of them would dare. Anybody serious, nobody would dare primary baby Hastings. Nobody would dare do that. And listen, I've ran the numbers. You just can't, it won't happen because all the organizations will just get behind him because again, the old man is owed a million favors. So I mean, yeah, you're right. Somebody might end up challenging Mike Hastings. It is not outside of the realm of possibilities. But if I would bet a lot of money that Mike Hastings would just win that primary.
Yeah, if he
It's
was
safe to say.
Go ahead, Matt.
It's safe to say that Mike would beat anyone who tried to challenge him. So
Yeah, and it's just that's just based on how Southside politics works more than anything.
Right, that was not. That was
Oh,
not.
wait, hold on.
funny.
Did I miss something? What? Say it again.
Oh,
Jerry. What did I miss?
I said it's safe to say Mike will beat anyone who dares to challenge him. So
That is not. That is not.
Drag.
Honestly, I think that's a pretty safe attack. I mean, Matt comes up with some one-liners that I cringe on, but that one, that's above board. That's above the belt.
I don't.
he's the one that did the beating, not me. So he takes the blame.
No. Yes.
Matt, I'm with you on this one. I'm on board with this one. That was a good line. Well played. All right. Quickly, I know not a lot of people follow county politics, but we do. Oliver, I know there's some developments in DuPage County with Liz Chaplin. What's going on there?
I normally wouldn't update folks about county board races, but I think Liz Chaplin is just an interesting figure in DuPage in general. She's been on that county board before Democrats even were thought was possible. So she's the finance committee chair. She was caught in the line of fire when Gene Kazmarek forgot to, lost the county $3 million. And she's up for re-election this cycle. And I think a lot of Republicans have been saying that seat's out of reach. But I've also heard that she's been talking about moving to Florida for a long time now. And I've heard it from a lot of people. And now you see the DuPage Democrats sharing campaign announcements for Andrew Honing. He's a Lombard trustee. So it's very unlikely that, the DuPage Democrats would be publicly bucking Liz Chaplin this way. So it's likely she's not running for re-election, which I think presents a huge opportunity for Republicans that wasn't there previously. So something to keep an eye on.
People who don't know, I mean, Liz Chaplin was kind of the tip of the spear a little bit for Democrats starting to make inroads in the Republican bastion of DuPage County. So her not running does weaken them a good amount.
Yeah. So, and this kid that's running he's a super young guy. He's a trustee, but he's super young. And if we could get a young woman and a woman who is experienced in the community, I think this could be a really promising matchup for us. So more to come on that.
All right. Well, Oliver's going to keep us posted on the Republican comeback in DuPage County. Here's hoping it finally starts.
I don't know how soon the next update will be, but I'm fingers crossed.
We're all just hoping and begging for it, but we'll see.
Please.
All right. We will talk briefly about presidential politics because it has an Illinois tie, and I know there we go. John's excited, but it's timely and it's important. I don't know what my neighbors are doing, but sorry if you guys can hear that. It's timely and important because the debate's coming up. And so a lot of these candidates are scrambling to make the debate stage. And as John mentioned, we've got poll results. It's just the 12th district. It's just one congressional district in Illinois, but Trump's at 53, DeSantis is at 16, Pence is at 9, and then no other candidate is above 4. So you got a bunch of candidates who are just not breaking into this field, but DeSantis seems to be stumbling a bit. That might open the door for somebody else, especially considering we'll see how DeSantis does in this debate. But if DeSantis doesn't do over expectations in this debate, you may see that be the end of DeSantis's chances in this race. So I'm going to open up the floor, give you guys a chance to talk about these presidential campaigns and how they're going right now. There's an Illinois tie with Doug Burgum, which we'll talk about next. But first, we'll take a couple minutes. Give me your thoughts on the presidential campaign because this debate's coming up soon.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis is stumbling. I mean, it's just kind of been blunder after blunder. He put out that weird video at the end of June, kind of going after Trump on, LGBT issues, and he got a whole bunch of backlash on that. And I mean, you're raising a lot of money, but good for you. But he's just really not doing that good of a job of contrasting himself between Trump. And we talk about all the time, contrast is the most important thing in a campaign. You know, and I don't think he's just doing a good enough job of that. And I definitely think it create an opening for, you know, maybe Tim Scott, who's raised a lot of money, the love of Colin's life. Nikki Haley could possibly have an opening. We'll see. But I mean,
Or maybe even
I think
maybe even new candidates getting in. I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of people who looked at this race and said it's Trump or DeSantis, so I'm not going to do it. If DeSantis stumbles, you know, the first primary, the caucus is finally set in Iowa. It's not till January, so we're talking about 6 months from now. There is plenty of time for other candidates to get into this race. The reason why we're talking about, I mean, the biggest thing is, again, we focus on Illinois politics. So no matter your thoughts nationally on if you think it should be Trump or you think it shouldn't be Trump, the fact is that in Illinois, Trump at the top of the ticket doesn't help us. He may help us in other states. I respect that. We're just talking about Illinois. And if we're looking to take back seats in the state house and in Congress, Trump at the top of the ticket helps us in some areas, but hurts us in way more areas than he helps us. And so there is a benefit to Republican politics in the state of Illinois by not having Trump at the top of the ticket. That's why we're watching this so very closely.
So speaking of Illinois ties, Collin, I noticed an old friend of ours was in the news, Mr. Kenneth Griffin of the Citadel Corporation. And Mr. Griffin, he was all set to back DeSantis. He says, anybody but Trump can't have Trump again. And now, you know, he's looking at DeSantis' campaign and saying, you know, and listen, Ken Griffin has a lot of experience with Jamokes running campaigns and losing him money. So, you know, he's probably, you see, you know, he's like, oh, this sounds like deja vu. You know, what the heck's going on here? So he's reconsidering his option for who he might back for president now that the DeSantis campaign seems stuck in the mid-teens and might be going further and further
and
down.
that did not get a lot of play in the news, but it should have. I mean, DeSantis with Griffin behind him has loads of money, basically an unlimited checkbook. DeSantis without Griffin behind him does not have that. So the fact that Griffin went from before, I'm all for Ron DeSantis, to just this week saying, I'm surveying the field, that's a big change. And I don't think a lot of people picked up on that.
Yeah,
well,
but
Mr. Griffin learned from his mistake in 2022 of picking a dog right out of the gate. You know, at least this time he's going to wait and see how things play out.
Yeah, well, and let's talk about that tie, because that very same political team is running Doug Burgum's campaign. And these campaigns are coming up with these very weird and creative ideas. I know DeRay's guy has come up with a crazy idea to try to get on the debate stage. I mean, this debate is August 23rd, and you have to have not only a certain poll numbers in various states. I don't want to get into all the rules here, but you also have to have a certain number of donors. And some of these campaigns don't have those number of donors. I saw Chris Christie was being pushed. Kinzinger was pushing people to donate to Chris Christie just to get him on the debate stage. And he just hit the threshold. So now Chris Christie will be on the debate stage. Burgum is struggling. And so now they're offering, what, $20 gift cards if people will donate $1 to his campaign. DeRay, what's your guy? Your guy had something that he's doing to try to get donations?
Yeah, he's doing a donation share the wealth program where the more people that you get to donate, then he gives it back to you. It's really just a total gimmick, and I give him credit for trying, but it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having to have an authentic actual campaign raise money instead of just paying to get on the debate stage.
you know,
Tell me you're losing without telling me you're losing. That's kind of what I think this strategy is. But
you know, I remember when Ron Paul would raise $6 million in a night off of internet donations, and he just make the debate stage like that. These guys are amateurs. If Ron Paul's beating you, you gotta rethink something going here.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny you bring them up, because this crew of people who've run a lot of Illinois campaigns, who I'll be honest, has purposely kept us out of some of those opportunities because they want to control it, because they got to make their money. They moved to Rand Paul to run his race and did very poorly. They ran Richard Irvin's race, which we know how that went. Now they're over with Doug Burgum running his race. It's not really an amazing track record of success. So if Doug Burgum, I mean, we saw in this poll, we took in the 12th, he was at 1%. So, I mean, it's so far, despite the fact of having a billionaire as their client, they haven't really moved the needle at all.
But Collin, you hit the nail on the head. It's a billionaire as their client. I mean, you know, this team, they just needed another billionaire to grift off of, and they just happened to found the wealthiest Republican governor in the country to, you know, make a load of money off of. I mean,
and you know what? The capitalist side of me says, all right, cool, you're going and making money. But the side of me that actually cares about winning as a Republican, it would really be nice if some of these consultants would start jumping on that train of, hey, let's start winning instead of just trying to fill our pockets.
That's too hard.
If
Yeah.
Ken Griffin goes on to Doug Burgum's campaign, then I've officially seen it all, and we're completely doomed.
I mean, I would hope he's smarter than that, but I mean, we've seen big Republican donors have kind of struggled with having political know-how. So I don't know. We'll have to see. All right, that's as much presidential conversation as I can stomach for 1 week, especially since we're running low on time. John, as a favor to you, we're going to let you talk about Northwestern. It does have a little bit of a political implication, but I know that your alma mater. So jump in here with the hat. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of non-political news. Northwestern had some, hazing allegations come out against their football team where, the student news reported, that there was, players being punished for mistakes with hazing. And it started with, former head coach Pat Fitzgerald was given a 2-week suspension. And I mean, people called the university out on it, saying it was too weak, it wasn't enough. And then, the entire football team put out a letter saying that Coach Fitzgerald was not involved and had no knowledge of everything whatsoever. But that wasn't enough. And then this week, the university fired him, and Coach Fitzgerald has hired an attorney to say that he was fired for, in breach of contract. But why this matters politically is a couple reasons. One, the governor's name is on the law school there. Governor Pritzker's an alumni. Speaker Welch is an alumni who played baseball there. So there's some political ties there that when some of those powerful people in the state attended this university. But what we saw in response was, Representative Cam Buckner, who played football down at the University of Illinois, is going to be filing a Bill of Rights, a student's Bill of Rights to kind of protect student athletes from this happening. But what's interesting is that, hazing is already illegal, in the state of Illinois. So it'll be interesting to see what that legislation looks like. But there's been a lot of criticism towards the university from both sides, whether it was pro firing Fitzgerald, against firing Fitzgerald. It's just not a great look for such a prestigious university, and kind of not a good look for Illinois right now.
And I'll tell you, there is more political angles here. I mean, Fitzgerald has been courted almost every cycle to run for some office, whether it be Senate or Congress. He's on the Republicans' radar constantly to recruit. Because let's be honest, if you get someone who already has name recognition, who's already well liked, we saw this with Casey Urlacher, where he almost made it to the state Senate in that race with Dan McConkey. I mean, you get these people, and Napoleon Harris on the Democratic side, people who come from the sports world tend to do pretty well politically. I know I live in Palatine. My mayor's Jim Schwantz, who's very tied to the Bears, also played professional football and was a pretty good player. He's constantly recruited, has no interest in it, but he's constantly recruited. I mean, Fitzgerald was pretty heavily recruited to run for office as a Republican. Seems like may have dodged a bullet on this one.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, there's just kind of been like a lot of pushback because, Fitzgerald was the only one who was fired. No players have been suspended for their role in these allegations. No other coaches have been fired. It is just the university handled this really poorly from a crisis communication, perspective. We teach candidates all the time how to deal with it. And Northwestern just really failed when it comes to handling this situation.
Yeah, you never realize how much you need crisis comms until you need crisis comms. And yeah, Northwestern did a pretty poor job on this, and they're still trying to pick up the pieces. But let's be honest, this isn't the only controversy Northwestern finds themselves in. Their baseball team, they've got a problem there with their coach. They had multiple lawsuits filed 2 years ago from cheerleaders. This is several years now of problems for Northwestern. So it's definitely going to be a political hot potato for anybody who's tied to the university.
Well, one more final thought. The biggest political hot potato that really comes with it is their new stadium. They're trying to build an $800 million new stadium in Evanston that's faced some, political pushback from, more left members of the community when it comes to zoning, who's going to be building it. And that entire project is most likely going to be put on pause until this investigation kind of finishes playing itself out.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stadiums, let's do a brief update on where the Bears are with their move, because it looks like things have stalled. I mean, let's talk about the timeline here. We've talked in the past, and we put out videos about what the timeline is legislatively if they're going to get anything done. And their best chance of getting something done is probably going to be October or November in the veto session. So the clock is ticking for them to get something done. And so far, talks have stalled with the local school districts. Talks have stalled, and even the momentum for this seems to have turned around a bit, where now you've got local resident Tom Svoboda is filing a recall petition against the mayor and one of the trustees in the village. The PR, if you sort of look at how are things playing out in public perception? This is definitely something where whoever's behind this on the Bears side is starting to really come from behind here, and the anti-crew is getting a lot of momentum. This doesn't look good for Bears moving to Arlington Heights unless they can regain some momentum here. Nobody has thoughts on that?
Go Pack.
Bears
We
screwing
need
up
to
an
get Ryan, our
important-
operations guy, on here. He could talk for an hour about the Bears in Arlington Heights.
Bears screwing up something important. Gosh.
You know what?
I'm
Lions
shocked.
fans are not allowed to speak.
Better than the Bears this year.
No, you're not allowed to speak either.
I'm
Yeah, same with Packers
defending
fans.
you. I'm defending. I'm defending you, Oliver. And here, all right, fine.
All right, let's do a couple quick hits here before we close down. I want to talk about this because there was a story in the news. It is very surprising to people that as everyone, those who have young kids are now out there thinking about how in the next couple of weeks they're going to have to go buy school supplies. And people are just amazed that in a non-election year, suddenly there is no sales tax holidays on school supplies. It's so shocking to people that here when Democrats don't actually have to be on the ballot this year, they didn't give a temporary tax relief to working families. And so people will be paying full sales tax on school supplies this year. Anybody have any thoughts on how shocking it is that there's no tax cuts in a non-election season?
It's my shocked face.
The sad thing is, Collin, is that a year from now they'll all forget there was no taxes in a non-election season.
Yeah, I mean, the voters have short memories, but in election season, Democrats run as Republicans. It's always so amazing. When it comes time to govern, they turn back into Democrats. All right, well, I said quick hits. I guess that was a quick hit. All right. A couple other things here as we steam towards the end. Let's get into one thing because it happened this week. So we talked a little bit about some of these districts. I know the 11th, Illinois 11th Congressional District is a decent, semi-decent pickup opportunity for Republicans. There is right now so far one candidate who's announced in Kent Mercado, right? I got that right. But I know there's some other candidates who are looking at it. Mercado looks good on paper, but so far the campaign has not been awesome. Last week we gave you guys a insight into kind of how Cor works, how we have Clown of the Week, and some of the things we do fun as a group. We also have a channel in our company Discord called Adventures in Bad Advertising, and in that channel, the highlight this week was a video put out by Kent Mercado, where it's a minute and a half, a minute 45 seconds, and not once does he look at the camera. I mean, he's got some professional people working for him in Axiom Strategies, our buddy Darren Murphy and a few others. He's got a pretty decent team he's put together there. That video was painful. I mean, the entire time he's looking up like this or over here at, I'm guessing, some notes or something. Literally not once does he ever look into the camera, and it's a direct camera shot. I don't know what's going on here. It's got a cheesy background in the background. I mean, if you're going to beat Bill Foster, we need a tier 1 style campaign. And I feel like the people running this race are professionals. I don't understand how this video ever was allowed to be made public. Does somebody know more than I do about this?
I wish I knew more. But quick tip, if you are going to be running for office and doing a video, do not put your eyes up here and talk. You want to look at the camera, and speak to the audience who's going to be watching your video.
Yeah, Lane will pull up and post a screenshot from it. We're not overplaying this. It just looks weird. Even to non-political people, it just comes off as weird. And a buddy who lived in the district who texted me, and he's a business owner, but he's not political. He was like, "This is who you're giving me to vote for?" I was like, okay, first of all, we don't know who all is going to run in that district. And second of all, I know the people running that race, I think and hope that they're going to do better when the real race starts, but it's not a good start.
Is this a case of like, we've all been there where we tell a candidate, please don't do this thing you're about to do, and they think it's a really great idea, and you're like, you try to stop them every which way, and they insist on doing it, and then they post this thing that's terrible, and then now
I mean,
here we are.
we've all had to live through that, right, Oliver? I mean, we've all had to have that, where it's like we give the candidates advice, but you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. I mean, that very well may be what's going on here, that you've got a candidate who thinks he knows better than his political operatives. But if that's the case, then these political operatives got to get a handle on that campaign, because the 11th, it's not a great pickup opportunity for us, but we don't have a lot in Illinois. The 11th is one of them. We can't waste that. If this candidate is not one that can win, then we probably got to go out and find somebody who can. And this is not a great sign in July. But on paper, Mercado looks great. I mean, he looks like a great recruit, but we've seen this time after time where somebody on paper does not translate into an actually good candidate in the results. So certainly something we're going to have to watch for, because that 11th is an important district, and we got stuck with a subpar candidate in the past. This last time around, I thought we had a decent shot because we didn't have that bad of a candidate this last time around. We need a good candidate this time around. So I don't know. We'll have to see. All right. Let's see. Looking at the clock, we're over an hour now. Would you look at the time, Chris? I'm so sorry. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things you want to talk about now in Chicago, and we're just out of time.
You're going to have more than enough time next week. I know damn well.
Well, it's right.
You're gonna have time to kill next week when I ain't here.
Next week, Chris is gone. Guys, we're going to talk about Chicago next week when Chris isn't here.
Let's do it.
Just so we
Feed
can,
Chris
he'll
the
come
Bears.
back with his letter of resignation just because of that.
Oh, I know what we should do. We should put Chris's little selfie of with his Darren Bailey t-shirt instead of him
We've
as a
already,
placeholder.
I
Burn
don't
that
go back.
t-shirt now.
I love my
T-shirt's
dad, but
caused
he's
me so
the
much
king of,
agita the last week. I'm burning that.
yeah, I mean, listen, I love my dad, but he's the king of dad jokes. And I learned early on, try to come up with new material instead of giving the same jokes over and over. My dad and grandpa are awesome, but they kind of like to regurgitate jokes. We've already hit Chris for that once. We'll find new material to hit Chris on next week.
I'm learning from Matt Dre in that department. So
It's always worth taking that risk to get some new content. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody watching this week. We had a lot to cover. And as usual, we got through like half of our agenda. So plenty to talk about next week. We've got a few things I want to cover about some hypocrisy that I see from Pritzker and how he's covered and how he's let off the hook for things that he should never be let off the hook for, things that if a Republican was in office and they would be eviscerated for, but Pritzker just gets a free pass. So we'll talk about that hopefully next week. I'll get my chance to cover my rants, but Chris won't get his chance. So it'll be a lot of fun. Once again, thank you to our political team, Abby, John, Matt, Chris. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you to our watchers, our listeners. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll be back in your inboxes next week. Thanks all.